Alright folks, you join me in my BMW G12 740i, or rather 740Li long wheelbase, I in the US. And today I'm going to take you through what made me get this particular car, since I don't necessarily seem old enough to drive a 7 Series. What made me get this particular car, and how has this car been so far in about 2 months of ownership. Okay, so the story of this car, this 740Li, really begins with the Alpena B7. So about 3 months ago, there appeared in Singapore's classified an Alpena B7, and I was driving an Alpena B3, and I love Alpena, as a lot of you know. Alpena is just one of those things that it just works because it's engineered for drivers who drive every day, like people like me. It's not for people driving on the racetrack. Yet it's very fast and super comfortable. So I went to see the Alpena B7. It was quite expensive because the Singapore cars are already very expensive in Singapore, and then the taxes on the Alpenas really add up. I was still planning to get it though, because I was like, you know what? Though I had never driven a car of this size. This is a 5.3 plus meter long car, but I was like, maybe I should take a leap of faith. I was thinking about it for a day or two, and as it turned out, it sold on the first day. It sold in one day. And then I was gutted, and then that kind of led me down the path of understanding more about this generation of car that the Alpena B7 is based on, the BMW G12. And as I researched more into the G12, when I was looking at the Alpena, I was pleased to discover some things that I really, really liked. Beginning with the first of which has to be the weight of the car, because this is such a light car for the size of it, given how massive a car it is. Because it's got it. When BMW was making their i3 and i8 programs, they learned a lot about how to mix carbon fiber with plastic and to make composites, and they used all the technology on this car. So this particular car, though I don't know this car with all the options, but generally this particular car, this long wheelbase 6-cylinder, 5.3 meter long car, weighs about 1770 kgs. The short wheelbase would be even shorter. So I was just stunned by how light this is, right? This is kind of what 3 Series, M340i would not be. I know, so that's X-Drive, but it would not be more than 150 kilos lighter. It's a much smaller car. So I was like, okay, so this car, despite being that massive, is as light as a smaller size car in today's context, especially in today's context. Secondly, the car has 4-wheel steer, right, which I test drove, by the way, and I was like stunned by how small this turning circle was. There's no getting away from the size of the car, but the turning circle is smaller than you might expect. So all of that combined led me to really be impressed with this G12. I would like to consider the G11 as well, which is the short wheelbase. But the thing is, the short wheelbase kind of defeats the purpose of this car, because the short wheelbase has the legroom of a 5 Series at best at the back. It's got all the luxury, but it's super tiny. This car has a little bit of that duality, that it has crazy legroom at the back. It's a limo, almost like a limo. Yet it's only has a 65 kg penalty over the short wheelbase. So for 65 kgs, and of course 25 centimeters extra length, you get so much more of a car. It's a completely different dimension of car. So all of this combined, I thought that I'm going to keep an eye out for a good 740, given that I want to get an Alpena B7 at some point in time. Hopefully that one reappears. I don't know how many there are in Singapore, but I wanted to see whether I can actually get along with a car that is this big, 5.3 meters long. And there were quite a few on the market. These cars depreciate a fair bit. They still are quite expensive, because in Singapore there's a certain tax component that remains in the price, and there's a lot of tax paid on this car. That said, I found one which was relatively low mileage, around 90,000 kilometers, around 55,000 miles. Great condition, because I saw many of the cars, so not all of them were in the condition that I would like. But 2 important things had been done to this particular car. Even though I didn't like the color of this car, we'll get into that in a second. 2 important things had been done to the car, and that's kind of how I decided. The first important thing that had been done is that the air suspension, the air shocks, had been replaced about a couple of years ago. That is the single biggest line item in terms of cost for this car, with record. So this car had full service history, and it had a record of the air shocks being replaced. and full service history with the dealer, with the authorized dealer. So that's one. The second thing with this car is that the previous owner had upgraded, because these cars come with 18-inch wheels, which is okay. I'm not somebody who's usually into massive wheels, but this is a big car, and also this is a very, very soft car, right? It's got incredible ride quality. We'll talk all about that in a second. This particular car, the wheels had been replaced to original BMW factory options, 20-inch wheels, which you can see. And that was also very appealing to me, because I knew that with this car, 18-inch would just be a little bit too, a little bit too soft for me, because I am an enthusiastic driver at the end of the day. So 20-inch kind of made sense. So I got this car. Now, thoughts so far, and I've driven this car for about 2,500 kilometers in about 2 months. We started things off with a bang, because we went for a nice road trip, 4 up. So we'll talk about that. So what have my impressions been so far? Actually, maybe I should just tell you a little bit of the spec first, and we'll talk about the impressions. So this is a fully loaded 740 Li. When I say fully loaded, it has every option known to man. It has, of course, the upgraded speakers, but that's the least of it. It's got 2 sunroofs, not one. It's got the full rear seat package, with the rear seats inclined and do everything. Massage seats across all 4 seats, heating, cooling across everything. I can't think of anything that this car doesn't have. Think of it, the car has it, so it's fully loaded. I went in a limo for a 5-star hotel in India a couple of months ago when I went for a wedding. They had a 740 as well. But I realized that the spec that they had in India was the poor man's spec, relatively speaking, compared to this car, because it had only 1 sunroof. The back seat was a regular back seat. It didn't have all of the adjustment. So this car, in Singapore, because cars are so expensive, generally what they do is when they bring the cars, they really, really load them up. This is not lacking for anything. And this, of course, is in this color called Cashmere Silver, which is more of a gold. It's more of a platinum blonde is the color that I kind of call this car blondie, because it's like a platinum blonde color more than silver, though it can look like silver. I prefer it the days it looks like silver, but it has a bit of gold in it. And the interior is cognac, and this is the regular leather, not the Napa one. Interesting note on Napa versus regular, you would generally be drawn to Napa because Napa is a expensive cost option, new. But when it comes to used cars, what I've realized is I checked out so many of these cars, and all the cars with Napa leather were much worse for wear. Whereas this Dakota leather is absolutely fine, absolutely fine. So the Napa leather, even for my wife, when she looked at it, she was like, you know what, it's just got, it just looks a little bit worn. Whereas this car doesn't look worn. It doesn't look new, but it looks like a 20,000-30,000 kilometer car. So that was the reason why I went for this car with the cognac leather with the Dakota leather rather than Napa leather. So those are the specs of the car. Now, how has the car been so far? So firstly, let's structure this. Let's talk about, have I had any issues? Then let's talk about how this car is to live with. Have I had any issues with this car? The short answer is yes, I did. The day I got the car, there was an issue with the air pump. Literally the day I got the car, which was a touch disappointing. The air pump was leaking, or something going on. So I'm going to just stop over here and I'll continue the conversation while we take a look around the car. So it was a little disappointing that the air pump was leaking, but the dealer was very, very, very honest, and he said, you just got the car from me, it's not right that the air pump is leaking. He replaced it for me for no cost. So the air pump has also been changed on top of the shocks being changed. And that is it. I've had no other issues with the car. The car itself, it is a complete car. Let's just say that, right? When I say complete, you have cars that are good to drive. You have cars that are comfortable for passengers. This car is both in a way that you cannot really imagine. And maybe we'll just we'll get the camera connected, and we'll walk around the car and I'll talk a little bit about what makes this car special. All right, you join me outside the car. Let's take a quick walk around it. You can see this color, it's cashmere silver, but it's really got a little bit of gold in it, as you can tell. Let's take a quick walk around. Ignore the sound of my feet. Look at the length of that rear window, or rather that rear door. It actually doesn't look too bad. I actually think the car looks relatively nice. Some people say it looks imbalanced on the rear, but actually in real life, it looks fairly balanced. The normal 7 Series, the rear door feels a little bit short. There we have a look at the interior. My God. The thing with the 7 Series is everything is such high quality. Whether it's how each of the switches feel, the wood, the leather stitching on the dash. These seats, these comfort seats are just incredible. The kind of adjustment you have in them, the kind of functionality you have in them is just incredible. You can adjust the seat, top of the seat as you please. And of course, then we have the coup de grace, which is the rear seat. That front seat is put fairly back and you still have enough space. And look at the amount of space behind my driving position. The thing though is with this car, you realize that you wish all cars had this much space. This is the amount of space a car should have, you feel, because each passenger can be as comfortable as they want to be without compromising any other passenger. You know, this part is rather underrated because you may sometimes think that the space in the limo is excessive, but what I realize is when you're traveling 4 up, you appreciate the fact that every passenger can just have zero compromise. That's really the point of a limo. Back of the car, I really like how this car looks from the back. Overall, I really like the look of this car because it has a more traditional BMW look. I don't like the facelift. This one is more traditional and I'm a bit more of a traditionalist. Boot is quite big. As you can take a look inside, it's quite long. It's less wide than you might expect, but it's more than wide enough to fit a couple of suitcases. Real estate paraphernalia, my wife on the extreme right. So yeah, no split seats obviously. This has just got that rear, the rear seats have all the adjustments, so you can't have fold down seats. And yeah, even sitting in the rear seat, maybe we'll just sit down and take a look at it. It's quite a good view. It's quite a lot of space and just everything is just incredible. You have all the adjustment here as well, as you can see on the rear seat. So you've got your own air conditioning, and of course you've got heated and cooled seats from the back. Then you've got the adjustability over here where you can adjust the seats like a front seat. Like an airline, you can bring it back into upright position after you've reclined it. Yeah, I think this is the right level. This doesn't have that stupid tablet, which would be horribly outdated. So it has all the adjustability, yet it doesn't have the gimmicks of the touchscreen tablet and the screen on the seats. I don't like that at all. Other things to note from the back seat, since we are in the back seat, is that you do have extra air conditioning vents on top of what you get here. This is also on the short wheelbase, but what you don't get in the short wheelbase is these extra ambient lights. These ambient lights for the rear passengers, they are just pretty nice. So this is a car where you don't mind which seat you get. In fact, I would say the front passenger seat is probably the worst seat in the car, because the driver's seat is not the worst seat in the car. It is an incredible car to drive. Let's get into the front seat. I'll talk a little bit about how it is to drive. By the way, this also has soft close doors, which I have not been using correctly. Let me just close this, and there it closes. Soft close. That click is very satisfying. All right, let's get into the front. By the way, I'm going to just switch on the car. Let me also turn the camera. And by the way, see how quiet it is inside here? Like it's pin drop silence, the double glazing or something. And I'm going to switch on the engine. Little bit of a nice purr telling you that you are in a 6-cylinder. And that's it. It's incredibly silent inside. There is just almost nothing. You can hear the engine a little bit. That will also settle down. And there you go. Nothing, no vibration, nothing. It spoils you. This car completely spoils you. Now, let's talk about this particular car. This particular pre-facelift doesn't have the stupid motorcycle-like dials. These are proper round dials, semi-digital obviously, but I way prefer this. There's a reason why I got this car, this pre-facelift G11, beyond the Alpena thing, because the facelift BMW kind of went a little bit awry for me around 2020-ish. Where everything became digital, everything became touchscreen. This also has a touchscreen, by the way. Nice song playing, as you can see. Oh, gesture control. I accidentally activated gesture control, which is a useless feature. But yeah, this car, what I want to talk about? I wanted to talk about how it drives. My apologies, I lost my train of thought. This car drives better than you would expect. So the thing is, it's not a small car. It also feels a little bit high because it has air suspension. So that's a good thing because you get the height of an SUV in a way, or rather, you get the utility of an SUV that you don't have to worry about, you know, tight car parks or tight ramps and etc. But you don't have the stupid height of the SUV. So you have the right height. And because of that, and combined with the air suspension, you get this car basically feels a bit like a hovercraft, or it feels a little bit like a. I'm not trying to say this like a cliche, but it feels a little bit like a yacht. Not in a bad way, like a Cadillac feels like a yacht. This feels like a sports yacht, if that's a better word, because you are up a little bit higher than you expect. The air suspension makes you feel slightly separated from the road, like you're gliding on it, which you are, technically speaking, I guess. Yet, this thing maneuvers with agility that you would not expect of a car of this size. Because of the steering. The steering has got the active steering, so it's very fast lock to lock. And not only that, it's because of the four-wheel steer. It has a very compact turning circle, so this car feels more agile. So, I'll give you an example. I had a 640i Grand Coupe, beautiful looking car, which I got rid of because ultimately it never felt agile enough to me. This car feels way more agile than the 640i, the Grand Coupe, which when you look at the cars, you would think that that's the sports car, this is the boring limo, but this car drives very nicely. The other thing that this car has, we traveled 4 up to Malaysia, and I'm not going to talk about the speeds being covered because, you know, the speed limit in Malaysia is 110 kilometers per hour. That said, this car, the kind of speed masking that it has, and when you have 4 passengers, you know, everybody's comfortable, everybody's happy, yet you are making progress at the speed that you cannot believe that you're making progress at. And it comes alive. It comes alive at 3-digit speeds, this car does. The long wheelbase makes it more stable. In the sports mode for the chassis, it lowers itself a little bit on the suspension. Like, I have always, because I do high speed runs between Singapore and KL all the time. I've been doing it for years. And I have never ever been satisfied with a car. Because all the cars to me, they just don't feel stable enough at a high speed. They just don't. You know, they feel too floaty, they feel whatever. This car is the first car that I felt, yes, this is what I've been looking for. So as a highway car, as a way to carry people in comfort, whether it's two people, you and your significant other or your friend, or 4 people, in my case, me, my wife, my brother and his wife as we went, I can't think of a better way to go travel the highways. Right, this spoils you. Every other car feels not refined enough, feels uncomfortable, feels whatever. This car is just, yeah. So just for that alone, I think this car is worth the price of entry. The way this car does highway trips, there's nothing like it. And because of all the technology of the 4-wheel steer and the active steer, there is not really a compromise for the driver. I could drive this by myself. I feel sometimes a little bit weird because I'm driving such a big car by myself, but I remember the weight. I remember that this thing weighs lesser than a lot of modern compact sedans, honestly, especially the hybrids. This weighs less than a Tesla Model 3, for example. So it's not like I'm driving something particularly weird, right, relatively speaking. Yet it can be very, very agile to drive. So as you can tell, I like this car. Now, what do I not like about it? Ultimately, it's kind of in the brief. It is a detached car. It is a car riding on a bed of air. So ultimately, it's not going to give you the connection that you get with like an old school BMW, like a BMW from, say, the 2000s even. You take any of the E generation BMWs, the E60, the E92, or even the 6 Series E64 or E63. Those cars, you can really feel the road. The steering feels amazing. This car's steering is a little bit light. Main issue with the car. Those cars, you can really feel the road, but of course they don't pamper you and isolate you the way this car does. So you can't really blame this car. They could have made the steering of this car a little bit heavier. Even in the heaviest mode, there's only 2 modes, regular and sport. Even in sport mode, the steering is not heavy enough. So if I was to change one thing about the car, it would just make the steering a touch heavier in sport. Keep it as light as it is in comfort, but in sport, make it a touch heavier. Yeah, that's it. Other than that, this is a pretty cool car. Really liking it. No issues so far. I don't plan to sell this car as such, but if the Alpena B7 comes up, or maybe a good 750i comes up, because I am a little bit tempted by the engine, maybe I consider it. But that said, the power of this car is the least of its issues. In fact, it is so powerful, you don't think you need any more power. It kind of makes me think, do I really want an Alpena B7 and pay all of that extra money? Because it's a lot of extra money compared to just keeping this car. Even right now, without any tuning on this car it's a sub 5-second car. That's how it feels, right? Car and Driver tested it in the US. Of course, US have a slightly different way of testing, but the 0-60 miles per hour in this car was 4.8 seconds, which was identical to the 750i of the F series generation. So the 740i of this generation is a 4.8 second car. From my butt dyno, this car feels faster than the F30 335i that I had. It feels faster than the S5 that I had. The S5, whatever the generation is, B8 or B9, sorry, the latest one, the relatively latest one, not the one that came out now. So it feels faster than those cars. It, of course, does not feel as fast as the Alpena B3. It feels way faster than the 640i that I had with the N55 engine. This, of course, has the B58 engine. So yeah, it's fast enough. It's more than fast enough. And there is another 100 horsepower to be had with a simple stage 1 tune, because you can just get this up to M340i spec because it's got the same engine. So it's kind of strange that the only thing that I want to upgrade about the car is maybe a 750 or an Alpena, but then the power is the least of the issues of this car. My hope is that the Alpena is a little bit more involving to drive in terms of having better weighted steering, because Alpena judge these things really well, and they have the freedom to do it. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm just keeping an eye out for the Alpena B7 whenever that appears. But yeah, otherwise I have no complaints about this car. I really, really like it, and I'll keep you updated on this car. Alright, I'll see you next time.